finer details of food origin stories. But what we do know for sure is that the Portuguesers were big evangelists for the magic of deep frying. During the Crusades, for instance, a lot of Portuguese Jews fled to exile in Great Britain and started frying up a storm over there as well. It didn't take long before they were frying up Britain's horrible tasteless fish, and Bammo, another instant classic, was born. Portuguese fried Jew fish quickly became the toast of London, and even better when paired with this new fried potato side the Belgians had invented. Potatoes, of course, having become all the rage in Europe ever since the Spaniards started exporting them from their colonies in South America. But this whole business of food cross-pollination between Europe and non-Europe wasn't just a 16th century thing, of course. For instance, a number of my German friends were keen to inform me of the mid-20th century Döner phenomenon. After World War II, Germany began importing a lot of Turkish workers to help rebuild their country and whatnot. And in time, these Turks learned to combine the tasty meats of their homeland with German flatbread, or Fladenbrot, to make what the Germans now call Döner kebab. And today, this is one of the most ubiquitous street foods in the big German cities, even edging out the beloved currywurst. Currywurst, of course, being a traditional German sausage with Indian-inspired curry sauce, something said to have been introduced by British soldiers during the post-war occupation. Interestingly enough, Döners have also caught on big here in Canada, where we call them donaires. In fact, in 2015, the government of Halifax, where they are particularly popular, even declared them to be the city's official foodstuff. Canadian donaires also consist of Turkish-style meat wrapped in bread, but how can this be? There's no Fladenbrot in Canada, right? Well, this is because Canadian-style donaires were actually introduced by Greek immigrants and are based on Greek meat wraps known as gyros, because of course we remember that Greece used to be ruled by the Turks back in the day. The other important difference is that in Canada, people never use the term kebab to refer to this kind of food. To Canadians, a kebab is one of those individually sized skewer stick things with meat, what the Greeks call souvlaki, or what people in the former Yugoslavia call cevapi, because of course the former Yugoslavia used to be under Turkish rule as well. Anyway, the point is, to Canadians, a kebab is definitely not one of these giant rotisserie things they cut the meat off of. I'm not even sure if we have a word for them. But whatever they are, you know who really loves them? The Mexicans. During the 1930s, Lebanese refugees from the former Turkish Empire came to Mexico, and in time they were able to incorporate those meat pillar things into the Mexican taco scene, creating what are now known as tacos el pastor, or tacos with fresh sliced meat. In short, this style of meat is the biggest Turkish culinary fad to hit the non-Turkish world since 1715. That was the year King Charles XII introduced a new dish to Sweden he had learned about during his military campaign in the Ottoman Empire. He called them meat balls. Speaking of Sweden, let me tell you about a weird experience I had when I was over there a few years ago. So the Swedes are really big into pastries, but for some reason they call Danishes wienerbröd or wiener bread, even though they were just full of jam and stuff. Nary a wiener to be seen. Well, this is because, despite the name, the things that we call Danishes are not actually from Denmark, but rather Austria. Austria was the pastry capital of Europe during the 19th century, responsible for the invention of croissants, among other things. Sorry, France. Anyway, in many European languages, they call the city of Vienna Wien, which makes something from Vienna a wiener. So the Swedes called an Austrian pastry a wiener bread because it was a kind of bread from Vienna. Get it? This is the same reason we call Austrian-style fried veal Wiener Schnitzel, by the way, despite it not having any wieners in it either. Though, of course, we only call sausages wieners in the first place because they come from Austria too. But you know, when it comes to the topic of countries influencing each other's food, I think too often we have a tendency to take an excessively Western-centric approach. So let us take a look at how a couple of countries in the East have influenced each other. Getting back to Japan for a second, it may surprise us to learn that many of the most beloved Japanese foodstuffs are actually Chinese in origin. And we're not talking about like back in the medieval times or whatever, when the countries were more integrated than they are today. We're talking about stuff that happened in like the last 100 years. According to food historian George Salt, for instance, the iconic Japanese noodle dish known as ramen is just a version of a Chinese soup with pulled noodles, which the Chinese called la mein. Mein is noodles in Chinese, as in chow mein or lo mein. Chinese immigrants brought la mein to Japan in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, but it only really became a big thing after World War II. During the peak years of Japanese fascism, it was not seen as acceptable to like Chinese food. Now, to some extent, the Japanese still think of ramen as a Chinese food, or at least a food with a strong Chinese connection. My friend Merrill informs me that one of the most popular Japanese ramen brands, Ajisen, still has very stereotypical Chinese branding with this little Chinese girl as their mascot. Merrill also says, there is also a very 80s wrestling themed anime called Kinnikuman, Ultimate Muscle in North America, where different countries are represented by wrestlers. China was represented by a wrestler named Ramen Man, and one of his finishers was to break his opponent's spine and twist him into noodles. Japanese gyoza dumplings, meanwhile, have a similar story. They are just a Japanese knockoff of what the Chinese call jiaozi, and were said to have been brought back to Japan by soldiers after they had finished viciously occupying China during the war. All right, now how about India? Many of their most iconic dishes come from somewhere else as well. Take everybody's favorite, samosas. They are originally from Persia. Initially, they were known as san bosog and are said to have gone mainstream in India during the period of time in which the country was under the rule of the Muslim Mughal dynasty, who brought a lot of Persian influences into the country. The popular Indian rice dishes of pulao and biryani, meanwhile, are usually taken to be Persian in origin as well. It all traces back to the original Persian dish known as pilav, which even the Russians eat in a form known as pulav, because they are, of course, from that whole corner of the world too. So yes, this is really a topic that just goes on and on and on. As usual, I would be more than happy to hear of any further examples of this sort of thing that you guys have. Now, this is obviously a very cliched observation, but when you study the cuisines of the world, something you learn very quickly is A, globalism is nothing new, and B, in this realm at least, we are undeniably better off for it. See you all next week.